Hello, Dave Hurwitz here at ClassicsToday.com, here with a discussion about the best recordings of Dvořák's Symphony No. 8. Now, everybody loves Dvořák's Symphony No. 8, and even conductors who don't generally do Dvořák like to do Symphony No. 8. It's an absolutely fabulous piece, but we like it so much. It's so bucolic and pleasant and lyrical and sunny and warm and singing and rapturous, and that we often forget just what a radical piece it really is. In the eighth, Dvořák basically throws caution to the breeze and ignores some of the most tried and true tenets of sonata form. The piece is actually a giant set of variations. That's really the best way to think about it, I think. You know, and it threw some of Dvořák's contemporaries for a loop. Brahms, for example, supposedly looked at it and said, okay, yeah, it's beautiful, it has themes, it's lovely, but what is it? What is it? What is it doing? And Dvořák, of course, regarded it probably as his favorite symphony. Why? Because it was the most uniquely personal, in some ways the most Czech of all of them. So, you know, it's one of those pieces that the more you look at it, the more fascinating it becomes. Let me give you just one example of that. You know, the scherzo, which is, you know, a waltz. Da 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 da. It consists essentially of three almost identical phrases in sequence. That's simply a variation of the opening of the adagio. Da 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 da. You know, that's all it is. It's fascinating. And the bird call, that do 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 ba do ba do ba do ba do for the first movement, becomes the source of the theme and variations in the finale. Bum bum ba da da dum ba da da dum bum, etc. You know, the more you look at the symphony, the more tightly integrated it is thematically, and the more fascinating Dvořák's process of melodic transformation is. It's truly, truly a remarkable piece of music. And the best performances, of course, bring out that quality. The only real interpretive issue is the finale, which is, of course, you know, theme and variations. And that particular theme and variations can sound a bit stagnant towards the end, you know, when it calms down and you just have one slowish variation after another, which hardly varies the theme at all. I mean, the whole artistic point, of course, is that the variations do nothing until the really rousing coda, which is an absolutely brilliant piece of music. I mean, you know, it's the equivalent of somebody putting their finger on an LP and speeding it up, you know, from 33 to 78. It's just an amazing sound that Dvořák gets out of it. There are also a lot of conductors who touch up the orchestration, both in the coda and a little bit before in the finale, especially at the very end when the strings are going dum bum 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 dum 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 bum 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 bum. Sometimes conductors add horns, especially in Czech performances, I have to say. And one of the most interesting things about performances of the eighth, in my view, is that, you know, the Czech recordings particularly don't impress me. That's me, of course, because there's a tradition in Czech performances of taking this finale at a very moderate tempo, and the coda in particular. I'm not sure if that originated with Dvořák or not, but for whatever reason, it seems to me that those performances often turn out to be rather dull. So, you know, I'm sorry about that, but we're going to talk about Dvořák's eighth performed by largely, not entirely, non-Czech performers. Some of the Czech performers do it wonderfully, of course, but for example, Neumann and his cycle, or Talich, you know, I mean, for some reason, the finales just don't catch fire for me. Anyway, so let's talk about recordings. First of all, I want to mention one I have it on my iPhone, but I've been holding on my iPhone like this, and you know, it doesn't work terribly well. Harnoncourt. It's a great recording, totally wonderful, with a Concertgebouw on Teldec. Now, you know, there is a variation in Ossia, you know, in the variation finale, where the theme is varied a little bit in the cellos in those last variations at the end, and Harnoncourt adopts it. Those of you who know the movement well will know exactly what I mean. It changes the shape of the melody a little bit, and I think it makes a nice little bit of variety in those last variations. But now I want to talk first, however, after getting Harnoncourt out of the way, of recordings that are included in complete sets, because there's so many of them there, and the individual discs are no longer available. First, Rowitsky with the London Symphony. Now, this is a really good cycle. I mean, it's terribly underrated. It was with the LSO, but of course, because the Kertész was out with the LSO, that was the one that got all the attention. And Rowitsky, who was on Philips at the time, now it's on Decca, was largely ignored. That's a mistake. His tempi are generally quite quick, except in the seventh, but his eighth is just beautiful, exciting and punchy, and really is similar in some ways to Kertész, although a little bit on the quicker side. Next, let's talk about Kertész. Now, Kertész's cycle had a lot of things going for it. He took all the exposition repeats in the early symphonies. He played everything complete. But more than that, the sound of the London Symphony in these recordings is really rustic and nice for Dvořák. I mean, the strings are sort of in the background. You hear a lot of the horns and the woodwinds, and Kertész lets them, who was never one for rehearsing, by the way, he lets them do their thing. You hear that. In the eighth, of course, the more emphasis you can give to woodwind textures and orchestral color, the happier you'll be. The eighth has some little quirks of orchestration. It has one note of a piccolo at the beginning of the first movement, and it has one bar of English horn, or actually maybe two bars. The English horn goes do 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 ba-do 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 do right at the end after the big climax, that initiates the recapitulation. It's very funny. Dvořák often does this. He'll throw in an auxiliary instrument for just a bar or two here or there. The piccolo has a similar lack of things to do in the New World Symphony. It has just a few bars here or there. In the finale of the Fifth Symphony, there's a single passage for bass clarinet. He likes to do that just to throw some interesting timbres into the mix. So Kertész is also a very good option, and so is Kubelik. Kubelik with the Berlin Philharmonic, I mean, they play absolutely magnificently. One of the nicest things about Kubelik's is that at the very end, what you may not realize is that the piece really ends, in a sense, with a bit of a timpani solo. It's dum bum ba dum bum da 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 dum ba dum. That's the last note on the timpani. It's a ba dum. And you usually never hear it. It's usually just blam, blam, like that, which I think is sort of a pity, because, the whole point of doing it that way was that Dvořák wanted to add an extra note of finality with that timpani flam. And you hear it. In Kubelik, you hear it. The symphony actually ends. It's really exciting. And of course, before you get to that last, microsecond of music, there's a lot of wonderful stuff going on. And now comes my sleeper performance. Well, I have a couple in here, actually, but one of the real sleepers as a cycle and as an individual performance is Ottmar's Sweetener. This is a terrific Dvořák cycle, and it was beautifully recorded by the German radio engineers back in the day. It's definitely worth hearing. His eighth is as charming and melodious and rustic as you could possibly want it, and it's exciting too. I mean, the tempos are energetic, and the playing of the orchestra is just beautiful. And the whole cycle, it's beautiful. There are some performances here that really have hardly been bettered, especially in the earlier symphonies. The second symphony particularly is gorgeous. But this eighth is one of the great eighths. And, Sweetener as a conductor was sort of underrated as a kind of East German Kapellmeister. One of my colleagues, did an interview with him later in his life, just shortly before his death, and he was completely astonished that anyone cared enough to want to talk to him, because he had no idea. He had no idea that his recordings had been disseminated. He had no idea that anybody might have respected some of them. But his Dvořák cycle is as good as any of them out there. And the eighth is basically as fine a performance as you'll get. It's terrific. So give it some thought. Next, we move to the New World without the New World. This is Dochnani and the Cleveland Orchestra. His performances of 7, 8, and 9 are just fabulous. Actually, I hate to say it, they're probably better than Zell's. I mean, you know, on the whole. And the 8th in particular is really a knockout. I mean, the performance is you know, typically Cleveland. It's razor sharp, crisp and clean, but totally idiomatic and in keeping with the spirit of the music, and the rhythms are so nicely sprung. It's a beautiful performance that you should really hear if you haven't heard it yet. Next, a singleton version, but one that just is so near and dear to my heart. Charles Munch, he didn't do any other Dvořák symphonies. He did do the cello concerto with Piatigorsky, but this 8th is just like, it's Munch. I mean, it's a smoker. Granted, it's not the Berlioz Symphony Fantastique. It doesn't work up that kind of steam, but shy of that, it's awfully close. Munch also does a little orchestral retouching in the central section of the finale. He adds a trumpet going da da da, you know, right before the climax in the middle. But it's okay. I mean, it just shows that he cared. He loves the music. And he's got the Boston Symphony in top form. It's absolutely wonderful. You can probably find a singleton disc in used bins too. It was one of those RCA Gold Seal things, or budget. I mean, it was even cheaper than that. It was a budget release. And I also have a Japanese RCA issue, so you know it's around. Now, here's another sleeper that's worth having. Herbert Blumstedt with the Staatskapelle Dresden, also on Berlin Classics, because that's where Sweetener was hanging out, although now I think he's on Brilliant Classics. That set's moved around a lot. Blumstedt, this is a piece that was really sort of made for Blumstedt. His blend of you know, soulfulness and plain-spoken honesty in everything that he did. This is another performance that treats the music with tremendous love, and in which you can really audibly hear the orchestra having a terrific time playing it. One of the things about these symphonies, this symphony in particular, is that it's a joy. It's just a joy to perform. I mean, I've done it several times, and you know, orchestras, it almost plays itself in the sense that orchestras just get into it and enjoy playing the tunes, and the sonorities are so captivating, and it mesmerizes the orchestra as much as it does the audience. It really does. Well, here's one that may surprise you. Carlin. Carlin recorded this symphony at least 3 times. I mean, it's sort of remarkable, you know. And this one, his first one with the Vienna Philharmonic on Decca, is the one to get. The playing is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, Carlin, as you know, was a string guy, but his recordings with the Vienna Philharmonic are different from the Berlin ones, and those are very good. Let's not kid ourselves. In that he has to let the orchestra be itself. In other words, he wasn't able to turn the Vienna Philharmonic into the Carlin machine, so that you get a wonderful mix of his own personality and that of the orchestra. Carlin, by the way, is a guy who just rips into the coda, and the Vienna players do too. They have a rip-roaring good time. And although Carlin was never one of those conductors who you could say was smiling, you know, he was like having a, you know, fun, and you know, he always sat there zombie-like with his eyes closed, conducting like this. You know, he'd just sit there and do this. And, you know, because he was having a Zen-like moment, communing with the music and all that. Well, doesn't matter. Whether his eyes were opened or closed, he was absolutely on top of the Dvořák 8th, and so was the Vienna Philharmonic on this particular performance. Finally, last but certainly not least, a newcomer, a totally fabulous, wonderful newcomer, Manfred Honeck with the Pittsburgh Symphony. Now, I don't know if you've been following these reference recordings releases with Honeck and Pittsburgh, but if you haven't been, you should, because every single one of them is worth hearing. Honeck is one of the great conductors alive today, and he's got the Pittsburgh Symphony playing in godlike form, and this series of recordings has been astonishing, and his Dvořák 8th is as perceptive and intelligent and imaginative as any performance on disc. He does do some unique things. He speeds up the coda in the first movement, and he has a little fun with the text. He usually does. He's one of those conductors who's not afraid to interfere a little bit in the scoring if he thinks it's going to help. And it helps. It all works. It's a totally sizzling performance of this masterpiece of Czech music. Definitely worth having. And frankly, there is no version that's better. And if you're looking for one version in fabulous modern sound that you absolutely can't beat, Honeck in Pittsburgh on Reference Recordings is your go-to performance. It's such a heartwarming thing to hear, just great recordings of standard repertoire and know that they still exist and that we can still do it. And there's still musicians out there who have that idiomatic feel for the repertoire. It's really one of those today when so many recordings of everything are out. One of the things that I've always said is that a great recording is its own justification. You can never really have enough fabulous performances of something. You can have more than enough, mediocre or average performances, which is what we usually get. But this is anything but. It's a magnificent recording and just a wonderful statement that there's great music still being made out there, which gives us just one more excellent reason to keep on listening to Dvořák's Eighth and to all of his other symphonies. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy!